The Big Property Podcast was created in order to be able to share more knowledge, experience, expertise and insights around property investing for you, so that you're not just getting my perspective, but lots of insights from many other very experienced property investors as well. And we are now recording more than 70 episodes with no intention of slowing down. 2024 was a phenomenal year. We had some really interesting guests, and what we've done is taken some of those best bits to be able to share with you. Our podcasts are typically run from about half an hour to an hour and a half, so a huge amount of footage that we've collated. What we've done, we've kind of pulled through that, picked out what we think are some of the best bits, and what I'd like to do before I share those with you, let me know which was your favorite bit for the year, and secondly, who you'd like to see as a guest on this podcast. Enjoy, and I'll see you soon.
$450 billion pumped into the economy, bounce back loans, support loans, subsidies, grants, and a fair bit of that once the lockdowns eased off, or even before that in 2021. Demand to buy housing was led by people's desire to move, and they had the wherewithal in many cases. So a suppressed desire to want to move in London currently, trying to get a 1 or 2 bedroom flat in most boroughs is not easy at all. So if you unfortunately do not have that family wealth to give you a kickstart, to give you a head start, particularly down south, down in London and the southeast, the percentage of people that are able to buy their very first property without the help of mum and dad, unless they're working in investment banking, is not that great.
Well, what was the thing that encouraged you to save? Because that's quite interesting. When I speak to a lot of people in their 20s, and I've got 2 of my kids in their 20s, my oldest is 30, generally people are not thinking about saving. How can I save $6,000 in their 20s? It's a case of, how can I have a good time?
Yeah. So I was also having a good time.
Yeah.
But I was just thinking, right, I know where I'm at. I was being honest with where I'm at. I think a lot of young people try and make the mistake of trying to act like some sort of baller when they're not there yet.
Yeah.
So I was definitely living in my means.
So how did it then transition for you? Was it a kind of slow start, or did it start moving quite quickly for you?
After the first property, it moved quite quickly. So the first property, I'd done something which most people wouldn't start with. We bought a large property and converted it into flats.
Right. So that was the first project.
That was the first project. So we converted a large corner property into flats, and we made one of them into a HMO, one of the flats into a HMO. So it wasn't what everybody else in the area was doing, or most of the people that I was speaking to were doing. And once we'd done it, a lot of people were like, "Oh, how did you do that? Oh, you're doing really well. It's really interesting what you've done," and they wanted to know more.
You need training on social media, because how else is anyone going to know who you are, what you do, how they can work with you, unless you've got a 30 grand ad spend every month? So social media for me is like the first thing that most people should start, because you want to start building that presence before you go out and look for investors and potential landlords. Not everybody is going to be successful, even with the best training.
Yeah.
I have lots of people that I train and they're just not action takers. And they jump from your course to my course to someone else's course, and they're still not compliant. Yeah. I have people that I've been speaking to for 2 years now. They still say, I'm still sorting out my compliance. It's not hard.
That person who came in with the paperwork and said, look, here's my money. This is how much I've got in the bank. And then came back the week after and bought me lunch. Or came back the week after and gave me a box of chocolates or something. The cheesy stuff worked. Because we're remembering them.
Yes, forefront of mind.
Exactly, they're always on my mind
space. I think that's so important.
Absolutely.
I think that, that's why we got into properties. We come from an architectural background, both of us.
Right.
And we both like dealing with people, and we both love property.
Yes.
So that was kind of the natural progression.
Yes.
But if you don't have that passion, and you're not, you need to understand that dealing with different people means dealing with different personalities and nurturing relationships, and you expect that from others and you want it back as well.
Yes.
If you're going to generate additional income, for example, in a particular tax year, and it takes you above that, it starts to not be a 40% tax hit.
Yes.
Marginally, it's a 60% tax hit. So that's the first thing. People don't take account of the fact that tax is a cost. One thing I would say to the listeners would be that do some basic research right at the start. So
have some basic awareness.
Absolutely. So understand what you're going to pay tax on, because I don't know about you, Saj, but when I was younger, I didn't know what I was going to pay tax on when I was going to start earning, right? In my first ever business, I thought it was going to be on everything I have in my bank account. I didn't understand capital revenue.
Right now we're in the council house, and as we were trying to find parking to get here, I keep seeing buildings. I think I've never noticed that building before. So there's a huge change happening within the city centre. And certainly from my days as a kid in the bullring, it's very, very different now. Where do you see that change going, and how do you see the city changing?
Yeah, so I mean, the city centre's undergone a fairly rapid period of change now over the last, I would say, probably, we adopted the big city plan back in 2010, which set the framework for a number of the schemes that you see coming forward now. So, you know, Paradise Circus just outside, you know, the origins of that were within that document. Birmingham Smithfield, where we got the joint venture with Lend-Lease, which is in for planning currently. Another big scheme coming forward. You've seen the changes at Arena Central, other big schemes coming forward at Snow Hill. So the big city plan set that framework. We're now in the process of reviewing that document with the future city plan and the sort of next generation of big schemes which will come forward from there.
Education wasn't really my strong point in terms of exams. I love learning. I used to do really well on like your mock tests, but then when it came to the actual results, I remember being compared as a kid to cousins that are like same age as me. They were like, oh, so got an A in their studies, and then I was getting like the E's and the C's, and to be fair, it was quite demoralising. But I think about it now, I kind of needed that rough love because it's built me to the person I am today, and it's helped me structure how I want to raise my own kids, and just be like, right, it's okay if you're not good at a certain way of learning. Just find what rocks your boat and then just kind of go ahead of it. You know, when you was a kid, you're like, you're either a doctor, a lawyer, or an accountant. Maybe the Asian community.
In our culture, exactly the same. My friend is exactly the same.
It's not, is it going to be a boy or girl? It's doctor, lawyer, or accountant. And I chose accountancy because I was probably really bad at science.
I started with 6 beds. My first one was 5, right, initially, and then I did a 4-bed. And I've gone up, you know, up to doing 21. We're working on one now, which is fairly large. You know, it all depends what your investment capital is, right? I don't believe in that sweet spot. I'm trying to make the community better. I'm trying to provide a service, and you're not giving me no support. So the question is what does my council tax pay for, right? What am I paying for you guys for? That email went out. And they, you know, within a day, they came running, literally in the car park, giving me the bins and everything else, right?
I was going to ask, what was the outcome? I'm amazed.
Of course, they were amazed. I had an MP saying, don't worry, I'm going to contact this guy. And then I got the recycling guy, rubbish, you know, his number and everything. And I think that is how you educate them, you know?
When it comes to building wealth, which is why a lot of people open businesses, tax is the greatest hindrance. If you have to take a dividend out and pay 40% tax on that, well, actually, you've got half as much capital to go into the next deal, the next venture. Whereas if you can eliminate that tax bill by basing yourself overseas, you've got twice as much kind of power behind you to go to the next deal, and ultimately you will accumulate wealth a lot faster than somebody who's in the UK paying tax.
But specifically, you just mentioned about people taking that first step. I was just reading, I'm in a brilliant studio with yourself, and I'm reading your own things up. A year from now, you'll wish you had started today. And that's one of the key things. And I think that quote is so powerful, Saj, that there is no time better than now. Now is the time when you've got to take action. It doesn't matter whether you're in, there's money to be made in property. If you're talking about property specifically, that's what it is. It's the big property podcast. There is money to be made in property wherever you are, in whichever cycle of recession. And now we know you've been around for as long as I have, maybe even longer. The cycles are natural and they happen consistently, you know, cyclically every 10 to 12 years. You'll have a little downturn, and you can make money on the way down as well as on the way up.
Yes, absolutely.
Because on the way down, people get a bit nervy, and then you can pick up deals quite well. And on the way up is when they've actually already run out of money. So then you get the nice pick off the cherries deals.
So when I first started, obviously things were slightly different, and you have to adapt to where you are and, you know, what's going on in the property world. The whole point of this is to have a hands-free lifestyle that I can go off and live abroad for a while or whatever it is.
Use it as a tool to do something else.
Yeah, a lot of people say, oh, I want to be wealthy. For most people, it's about to be able to make the choices.
Freedom of choice.
Freedom of choice. It's one of my things, is freedom of choice. I have 3 things. I call it learn and grow. I always want to learn and grow. I always want to have freedom of choice. And I want to have some fun.
Yes.
each phase, each generation, extra hurdles come into place.
What is it that you are seeing in 800 properties that other people are missing?
I think it's the most valuable commodity I know in this business is relevant information. And that's where I was an agent for 10 years. So I know what to look for. And I'm fully aware that most agents aren't going to want to give you the information that I get. So I was very switched on, because when I got involved in estate agency right at the beginning, a guy called Greg Giorgio said to me, 95% of this business will take you 2 to 5 years to learn. You'll learn about deeds of variations, possessory titles.
Well, people think that I grew up with this wealth. I didn't. We come from a very poor background, and then I started sourcing, and then I made millions. No, it didn't work like that. How I got into
That's
that...
the expectation many have.
Yeah, nah, it was out of desperation. I ended up with debt of £187,000 in credit cards.
Wow.
On top of everything else.
That's trying to cash flow the business.
Yeah, because look, you got to, we got a good team. You got to pay people, haven't you?
Yes.
Your growth is in your biggest adversity.
Yes.
And that got the fire right up my jacksie.
If you're too comfortable, then there isn't the hunger to want to do something. But when your back up's against a wall, or your heels on the edge of the cliff, and the big drop down, that can wake a lot of people up.
Definitely.
I was allowed to make my mistakes because he knew, as I now know, that that's where you get your valuable lessons. Again, from our point of view, when we're looking at projects, the number at the bottom has to be big enough because we've got the stakeholders to bring it. So effectively that profit is shared between the money, the deliverer and the developer.
When you make money for the first time from your own business, it's a bit of a weird feeling because it just feels like you made money out of nothing. Like you just, especially when I did, when I was working for this person and I made a 10%, 20% cut, or even when I then raised money and then I did my first one, I don't know, it just feels like, it kind of feels illegal in the sense that you have just made money out of nothing, right? Like nothing. It's not like, fine, if you go to a job, you're trading your time for money, so that's a different situation. But here, you raised some money and you found a property. And because I remember, I rented my first studio for £725 per month.
Okay.
Right.
Rented this off from the landlords.
I rented this from my letting agent for £725 per month. And then the intention was I will put this onto Airbnb.
Right.
And I got the first month, I think the revenue was like 1,400 or something, right?
Okay.
Now, so it made a profit after bills and, everything of like, let's say £400, £500 or whatever that figure was. And it just felt like £500 out of nothing because you've taken someone's funds and now you've found a property, and for the same property, you're charging so much more. So I was pretty.
It feels less tangible. It's not so you made something with your hands and you're charging for it, because what you've done is use skill and acumen to pull something together.
For sure.
And you got rewarded for it at the end of the month.
Because we've had in the past, whether it be people we've worked with, and that they might have had 7 or 8 meetings with somebody and not got anywhere.
Each one becomes a bit of a chat as opposed to...
Yeah, they're just kind of like, oh yeah, I quite like having a cup of tea with this person and a chat, and because they're a nice person or whatever. But if there's no direction that you're headed, there's no clarity there, then it can just drift.
Yes.
In other circumstances, you might present it in a way to say, in order to hit your expectation, your £1 million, this is how we will have to structure the deal, or this will have to happen in order to meet your numbers.
People in property get a bad reputation, and people are afraid to say, I'm a landlord or I'm a developer. And the reason they are is because of the bad reputation, but also the stigma that's associated to it. You're just rich. That's just how people perceive it. Well, I came from nothing.
Yes.
I've built my wealth. I've worked very hard to do that. I've committed time. I've been super dedicated. I got educated. I've sacrificed a hell of a lot to get to where I am today, to have the choices that I have and the wealth that I have. And I think a lot of people just assume that if you're in property, you come from money. And that's not true at all. In fact, probably 80% of the people that come across my door have created their own wealth.
One bad apple can move in, and 5 other tenants can move out.
Yes.
So we've seen that.
We've experienced that as well.
And then that one tenant stays for quite a long time without paying the rent. So that has been our experience about 7 years ago now on a property which we then put on a long lease.
Yes.
So we took out the risk that. So that's on one side of the spectrum. On the co-living, we don't have those issues because we've learnt those lessons. And when we're trying to curate that community, tenant vetting is very, very important. And there are lots of ways that you can do that, even involving the existing tenants to help choose their new housemate. And it's something whereby if you create a co-living style property, you get multiple applications, which allows you to be picky with who moves in.